Hi everyone, welcome to Crafting Dialogue, where we're going to talk about the importance of dialogue, how you can use it in writing, and why it's a critical skill for you to develop as an author. But first, I will introduce myself so you know that I have a little bit of expertise in this area. My name is Leah, but I write as LD Crichton, and I am the author of The Enchantment of Emma Fletcher, and more recently, this book, All Our Broken Pieces, which was nominated for the Forest of Reading White Pine Award and the Amy Mathers Teen Fiction Award. I am also the author of the only official fan fiction for One Direction and a Wattpad star with 155,000 followers. By day, I am a visual novel editor / narrative game designer, and by night, I keep writing stories, so I know a thing or two about dialogue. So let's dive into it. Mastering the skill of creating authentic dialogue is absolutely critical because you could have a story with plot twists at every turn. You could have the most relatable hero. You could have spent hours and hours making the most incredible world. But if the dialogue is flat, your story is going to flop. And there's a really simple reason for that. When people pick up a book, they want to connect with the characters emotionally. And how do we connect emotionally with people? We use our words. We speak. So naturally, once you've mastered this skill, you can create intimate emotional connections between your reader and your characters, and that is what keeps people turning pages. It's easy to say that dialogue is a conversation between two people, and that's true. That's what it is. But there is a lot more to it than that. And in order to dive into dialogue, we should probably familiarize ourselves with the different types of conversation that our characters could be having. The first type of conversation is discourse. It's one way and cooperative, and it's used to deliver information. The second type of conversation we can have is dialogue. It is two-way and cooperative, and it's used to exchange information or to build relationships between people and characters. The third type of conversation we could be having is diatribe. It's one way, it's competitive, and it's used to strongly express emotion or inspire. And the fourth and final one is debate. It's two-way and competitive, and obviously its purpose is to convince or to win. So regardless of what your dialogue is going to be, the conversation itself will fall into one of those four categories, and that might influence the tone of your dialogue. Find me a writer alive that has not heard these horrible words: show, don't tell. Everyone hates those words. Everyone I know hates those words. But dialogue is a tool that allows us to do this almost seamlessly, because when we give our readers too much direct narrative, they don't feel anything, so they're not invested, so they're not going to want to keep reading. But with dialogue, you can actually hook your reader right from the beginning and just have them absolutely invested in your story. Let's really quickly talk about how we can use dialogue to help us show versus tell, and what the actual differences between showing and telling are, because for a long time when I was a new writer, I used to get that advice a lot: show, don't tell, but no one ever expanded on that. They would just say show, don't tell. And I had no idea what that actually meant, but when we're talking about dialogue, it's really easy to distinguish the difference if we invent a scenario. So let's just say our book is about newlyweds, Janet and Robert, and they're off on their honeymoon to a seaside cottage. If I were telling my reader about this seaside cottage, I might say, the cottage was surrounded by lush green foliage and sat by the edge of the sea. The aroma of flowers mixed with salt water in the air and assaulted Janet's senses while Robert struggled to wheel the suitcase along the uneven cobblestone path. Okay, so we've now just given our readers a visual, but it is pretty boring. There's nothing to it. Let's try the same scenario with dialogue. So we can have Janet race past Robert and say, "Robert, look around you. This place is beautiful. Have you ever seen so much green?" Robert can grumble, "I'm not seeing anything right now, Janet, except the tips of my toes while I try not to kill myself on this homicidal pathway." And Janet can say, "It's not a homicidal pathway, silly. It's cobblestone. This place is so quaint. You can smell the flowers in the air. You can taste the salt. It's perfectly charming." So in one scenario, we get the exact same visual, but in one scenario, we have feelings. One scenario invokes feelings, the other does not. The difference between show versus tell. There it is. Invoke feelings, don't invoke feelings. Invoke feelings, don't invoke feelings. So using dialogue is a great tool to be able to do this, and probably the most important tool of anything we're ever going to talk about today in this class using dialogue for. Let's face it, a large majority of the population doesn't have the time, patience, effort, or energy to want to bother reading line after line after line of narrative description. So if you don't want to lose them, keep the dialogue snappy and real right from the beginning and use it to show as much as you can. So now that we're using dialogue to show versus tell, let's talk about another quite often seen rookie mistake. And it's a bad one because it screams that you have no writing experience. Put a finger down if you've ever described a character like the following. I look in the mirror at my icy blue eyes, staring back behind my chestnut-colored fringe. I apply some red lipstick and walk over to my closet and select a white dress with black boots. Yeah, you lost me. Blah, blah, blah. When was the last time any of us woke up, looked in the mirror, and went, my green eyes look so vibrant today. My red hair is wild. It does its own thing. We don't describe ourselves like that to people. Like, we don't. So we shouldn't in a book either. So instead of being like, my icy blue eyes, my chestnut hair, maybe you might want to say something like, give our character an action. She's doing her hair. I don't even get the elastic around twice before it snaps. My chestnut curls demanding their freedom. My hair has always been thick, dark, and unruly, just like my mother's. And my best friend, Emmy, says the juxtaposition between my hair and my icy blue eyes is beautifully alarming. When I look in the mirror, I can't help but agree with her. I mean, one of them sounds a lot more interesting than the other one, and it's not hard to figure out which one sounds more professional, more authentic, and more organic when you're reading. So now that we've discussed show versus tell in dialogue, let's see other ways that we can use it for a literary device to help us make our stories better and our characters rich and engaging. So we know there are two different types of dialogue. There is internal dialogue, monologue, inside voice, inside thoughts, and there is external dialogue, outer dialogue, speaking between two or more characters. But regardless of if it's internal dialogue or external dialogue, they both have one thing in common, and that is that they need to have a purpose. So dialogue, regardless of what kind, needs to have a purpose. No one wants to waste their precious time reading a conversation that goes nowhere. Like, no one wants to read 2 pages of what your characters are going to wear unless your story is about Fashion Week. So if it's irrelevant, don't include it. It can hit the cutting floor. But a good way to determine if it's relevant or not is to decide, does dialogue have purpose? So does it do one of the following things? And if it does one of the following things, sure, keep it there. If it doesn't, you don't need it. Does it move the plot forward, show conflict or opposing point of view, reveal relationships between characters, reveal personality trait, point of view, or something about your character that's unique? Does it show aspects of the character's inner struggle towards reaching their external goal? Or does it develop the theme of the story or create a more realistic experience for our readers? We need our dialogue to do at least one of those things, or it shouldn't be in our story. In order to provide us with examples of how dialogue can achieve any of these things, we will once again need to come up with a story. So let's do a romance story because it's the best-selling genre of book. So definitely the most popular. And we'll do friends to lovers for the theme because it's easy. So let's say Brianna has always had a crush on her best friend, her childhood friend Sam, and she's just going to get the courage to tell him when he asks her to be his sidekick and help him get another girl. And then during that, she's reluctantly agrees to do it and gets in a car accident, and Sam realizes that Brianna's the one for him when he's taking care of her because he's loved her all along. So let's just say that's the premise for our story. So a conversation that might take place in that scenario to move the plot forward would be Sam confessing his feelings either to himself or to Brianna, because we know something has changed now between the two of them, and the whole trajectory of the story is now going in a different direction. So that's quite an easy example of how dialogue moves the plot forward, but technically, like, pretty much every scene in your story, dialogue or not, should move the plot forward or it shouldn't be there. But that's a whole nother class. However, it is quite easy to use dialogue to forward the plot. Same would be in a hero's journey type story when your everyday man gets his call to action and he accepts the journey. Perhaps one of his allies says to him, you're the chosen one. That's dialogue that we know is going to change the whole plot of the story. It's going to move it forward. He's the chosen one. We know that and when he accepts his mission, like, he accepts it, and we know that that's moving the story forward. We're going on a mission. Opposing point of view kind of speaks for itself. I don't think I should have to tell you how to make two characters not have the same opinion about something, but in our scenario, for example purposes, let's just say Sam has now asked his buddy Brianna to help him court this other girl. Well, Brianna secretly still has a crush on him, and he picks out this gift, this ring, to give this other girl, and Brianna's like, buddy, that's not a nice ring. And he's like, what? Are you kidding? It's beautiful. And she's like, no, it's really not. And when she opens it and her face falls, don't say I didn't warn you. That's conversation that has opposing point of view. Again, go on Twitter, Facebook, go on the internet. You'll find plenty of examples of dialogue that has opposing point of view. Revealing relationships sounds almost as obvious as showing conflict and opposing point of view, but obviously a lot of dialogue reveals relationship with characters. An example from our example might be talking to her mother about Sam. So we get information about her feelings towards Sam, so that's a revelation of a relationship, but we also know that she's close enough to her mom to share these things, so it's a different kind of revelation of a relationship. Provide backstory or exposition. This is, again, a pretty easy one. If a character says anything about their past, an incident that happened in their past, where they grew up, their parents, their family, reasons behind their mission, their goal, this is all backstory and exposition that will be revealed through dialogue. Using dialogue to reveal voice, point of view, or personality traits sounds relatively easy, because if we're doing our job right as writers, our characters are going to sound pretty distinct and have their own personality and quirky traits anyway, but we can add to it with dialogue in a simple conversation between, I don't know, make one of your characters an extrovert and one an introvert and give them a conversation with each other. They will sound very different. So an example of using dialogue to show the internal struggle towards the external goal would be our girl Brianna, who wants to tell Sam, but she just can't work up that nerve. So if we're privy to any of her thoughts, or how nervous she is, or how he makes her feel nervous and unsure, and she could ruin everything, that would all be examples of dialogue of internal struggle regarding the external goal. So to emphasize theme or create a more realistic experience for our reader, in our imaginary scenario, we might open the book with a monologue from Brianna talking about how, she's seen friends to lovers just fail a million times and she doesn't want to risk anything. And right there, we're emphasizing the theme of the story. In a more serious topic, let's say the theme of your book is poverty. A conversation or a dialogue where a mom is calling a bill collector begging for another week would definitely emphasize that theme. We now know how to use dialogue to develop voice, point of view, or show our reader distinct character personality traits. But let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because that is what makes your characters jump from the page. In theory, you should be able to take a conversation with dialogue tags. That's Brenda said, Richard said, Bob said. You should be able to take all those out, just have the dialogue, and you should be able to tell who is distinctly speaking. And in order to do that, you need to consider a few things. Where did they grow up? Where are their parents from? What is their personality type? What is their profession? And what is their education? Because all of these things influence how we speak. A character who grew up surfing in Maui and now runs an Airbnb on the beach is going to sound light years apart from a silver spoon-fed frat boy CEO of a real estate development company in New York. Throw in little things you almost wouldn't think about. So the Maui guy might say, let's go for pizza. The New Yorker might say, I could really go for a slice of pie. It's important to remember that in an effort to make our characters unique and distinct, you can't just throw words around willy-nilly, especially if you're writing a character that's culture is not your own. You need to absolutely do the research, the work, and the diligence to be a proper ally. So that means research, find sensitivity readers, listen to what they say to you, and absolutely always be mindful of the language that you use because it's important. So we've covered why dialogue is important, the types of conversations we can have, what purpose dialogue should have, and when to use it. Now we'll go over a few little rules. So rule number 1 is don't be like Doug, but do. And if you've ever seen the movie Up, you know Doug the dog, and he's always off in every direction, a million different directions. You don't want your conversations or your dialogue to do that. You need to stay on track. However, it can't just be like straight track is not a job interview, it's a conversation. So it's not like question and answer period. There needs to be some kind of natural flow to it. So without leading your reader astray, you need to throw in little things like your character might be unable to recall a detail, or there might be a knock at the door, someone's phone rings or something like that, because those things happen in real life. And as much as you don't want to derail the conversation, you do need to keep it realistic or it feels forced and it does feel like you're reading a job interview. Less is more. People read your book to escape. They don't sign up to work. And if they have to work to make sense of your book, they're not going to want to read it anymore. So avoid being overly wordy. There are a million filler words. I'm sure you can just Google filler words or sticky words, and you'll find a huge list of them that you can go through your manuscript and basically delete 90% of the time. And those words are like almost, like, just, definitely, seemed. So when you look for words like that and eliminate them from your dialogue, it definitely helps it be more organic and free-flowing. Grammar is one of the most important things in your story. So grammar and punctuation, absolutely. When it comes to dialogue, though, you need to toss those grammar rules out the window because none of us sound like that. If we did, we would sound like that TikTok sound where the guy's like, I am so shocked. I cannot believe it. We don't speak like that. We speak in sentence fragments. We use slang. We abbreviate things, and your characters should do this as well. Not constantly, of course. People can speak in a proper sentence, but they don't speak like that all the time, and neither should your characters because it doesn't provide a realistic experience for your readers. Action is helpful, but use it sparingly. And by that, I mean, if you're having an intense conversation, have a character pinch the bridge of his nose or pace or something to show us that it's an intense conversation. Do not give your characters an action for every line of dialogue. That, again, is a rookie mistake, and it is extremely distracting. But when it's relevant, try and give them an action to break it up a little bit. For the love of all things, keep it simple. If you're using dialogue tags, I try and avoid using them whenever possible. But if you're using them, he said, she said, keep them simple. We don't need he mused, she inquired, she whispered, he wailed. We don't need that. It doesn't add much to the book. It really doesn't, unless it's like an intense moment. Just keep it simple. Kind of piggybacking on the don't be like Doug, but do. Never have your characters answer direct questions. So if we were to have a character inquiring with another character, trying to get information about something, anything, if it was just a question and an answer and a question and an answer, it would be incredibly boring, incredibly fast. So, a conversation might, do you think this is what I wanted? And then character B would be like, it doesn't matter what I think. You're going to do what you're going to do anyway. Well, it's more interesting than, yes, I think that's what you wanted. No, I don't think that's what you wanted. So it needs to reflect real life. We don't often answer direct questions, right? We answer questions with questions. We think about it. We hum and haw. It needs to reflect real life or it won't feel authentic. When you apply all these rules together, it's going to make your story beautiful, seamless, and have characters that jump right off the page into your reader's heart. Happy writing!